notwithstanding all of this, the world is a better and safer place because Saddam Hussein is no longer in power and the Iraqi people have been removed from the fear of a terribly sadistic despot.
Absolutely.
And that alone might have made this war justified.
Yeah, it was not the argument that was advanced.
I know
and
that.
I'm not sure that the United States would have been able to persuade some people to go to war in order to do away with the dictator. But it's
because a lot of
clear.
other people might be on that list.
Yes, that could. But it was one of the most horrible regimes that the world has seen, and the competition was pretty hard.
Right.
And it was well known. So I think one should look forward now. That's what I do. We analyze the past, but we should look forward.
But I mean, next to last, it looks like that there has been some benefit from the fact there's been regime change.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
And that it might have an impact on the region.
Yes.
Which is probably the reason they wanted to do it in the first place.
Maybe.
They just used the wrong argument.
Well, we heard so many arguments. One argument was that they didn't want to have their troops sitting in Saudi Arabia, and they had to have troops in Saudi Arabia, so long as Saddam was a danger. So there are many different arguments. But the one that they given the UN and the US people was on the whole weapons of mass destruction. But I don't doubt that good can come from this. Maybe the peace process will be eased, or maybe you'll have more suicide bombers. I mean, it's too early to draw the balance under this. I hope, like you, that it will come out in a positive way.
Democratization, impact on the conduct of other nations in the region.
It was a horrible regime,
pathway.
And no one doubts that, and we all knew that before. So that is a clear gain in the balance.
Could you say that the work thus far of the ISG, and I recounted a number of things, including the ricin and so forth, in my opening statement, does not that lend itself to the understanding, the conclusion that Saddam Hussein and this military machine under his control posed an imminent threat, perhaps to the neighbors, perhaps to those beyond the perimeter of the neighbors?
Senator Warner, I think the world is far safer with the disappearance and the removal of Saddam Hussein. I have said, I actually think this may be one of those cases where it was even more dangerous than we thought. I think when we have the complete record, you're going to discover that after 1998, it became a regime that was totally corrupt. Individuals were out for their own protection, and in a world where we know others are seeking WMD, the likelihood at some point in the future of a seller and a buyer meeting up would have made that a far more dangerous country than even we anticipated, with what may turn out not to be a fully accurate estimate.
Thank you.
And I think it's important to establish your belief and that of the overwhelming body of intelligence and the intelligence community, both here, overseas, and in the Clinton administration, the following facts. Saddam Hussein developed and used weapons of mass destruction. True?
Absolutely.
He used them against the Iranians and the Kurds. Just yes or no?
Oh, yes.
Okay. And UN inspectors found enormous quantities of banned chemical and biological weapons in Iraq in the 90s.
Yes, sir.
We know that Saddam Hussein had once a very active nuclear program.
Yes.
And he realized and had ambitions to develop and use weapons of mass destruction.
Clearly.
So the point is, if he were in power today, there is no doubt that he would harbor ambitions for the development and use of weapons of mass destruction. Is there any doubt in your mind?
There's absolutely no doubt, and I think I've said that, Senator.
Good. But it's important to emphasize this point when we look at what has obviously been an intelligence failure.
I agree.
When you answered a question from Reuters, what happened to the stockpiles of biological and chemical weapons that everyone expected to be there, your answer was simple, quote, I don't think they existed. So what needs to be established here is that when we remove, at least I believe is your view, and certainly mine, that, as you just stated, America, the world, and Iraq is a far better and safer place with Saddam Hussein gone from power. And the sacrifice made by American citizens and that are serving and sacrificing today was not only worth it, but very important to the future of the Middle East and the world. Do you share that?
That's certainly true, Senator. I probably learned not to speak to wire reporters and even to watch out for senators who want one-word answers.
Yeah.
It tends to compress complex issues.
But you agree with the fundamental principle here that what we did was a justified and enhanced the security of the United States and the world by removing Saddam Hussein from power?
Absolutely.
Okay.
My question would be very simple. It's asked frequently, it's discussed frequently. Is it your professional judgment that the world is better off with Saddam Hussein now in custody, facing the rule of law?
Well, in my opinion, there was a risk of Saddam Hussein being in charge of a country with that amount of resources and with that amount of potential for both good and evil. What Iraq was under Saddam and the potential of what it could be, there was an enormous difference. The trends, I think, are important. And our analysis in this study was to not look at a single point in time, but to look at dynamics and trends. He clearly had ambitions with respect to weapons of mass destruction. He clearly had a strategy and tactic to get out of the constraints of the UN sanctions. He was clearly making a great deal of progress on that. But for the intervention of the events of 9/11, I think the world would be in a very different position right now.
In conclusion, the world is better off with his now facing in custody the rule of law to account for his crimes.
I'm an analyst, and I realize I'm in a political world right now.
No, it's a
but I
simple,
have to agree,
straightforward.
analytically, the world is better off.